take the blame for everything ever. In the process of all of this, I have lost webcams, so I will be redoing webcams. Ryan promised a story, or was this a lie? Was this a ruse?
What?
Yeah, it was a ruse. All
Are
right,
we
so
back on?
we're back on.
Are we back on?
We're
All
back
right.
on.
So can I continue my
You may
rant
absolutely
about
continue.
players
Absolutely continue.
and esports organizations? Yeah. So I was saying yes, players need to become aware that they need legal advice to be well best presented. But on the other hand, not all organizations are shady. There are some organizations out there who um, because of the huge influx they have from investors. And the more money is in the business, the more important it is, in my opinion, that they take care of their contract and look quite closely at it. Also, for them to, be clear about their obligations. Because in my opinion, yeah, you can say like, organizations sometimes behave in a crazy way, but so do players. And I think this happens sometimes because they do not read their contracts or they just don't care. And I've just seen as much frustration on the side of esports organizations because players don't read the contracts, then behave erratically. And it's very hard to deal with that because esports organizations make an investment into a player. They believe in a certain lineup. And if the player doesn't show up the way, you thought you agreed to, it's also a problem. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, I'm not saying all organizations are shady. I'm just saying there are quite a number of shady organizations. Some of even the top ones in the world that are winning major tournaments have their players in contracts that are entirely unconscionable, if not illegal, and they're telling things to their players such as, if you get an attorney, we're going to kick you off the team.
Yeah,
this isn't happening at the free tournament level or people just getting into it. This is the top of the top sometimes. There's also plenty of teams that treat their players really well, and they have contracts that are building a positive future for esports, and I'm very happy to see that. Renegades and a lot of others are really doing the right things here, but there's plenty that aren't. And until players start realizing that, they are the asset here, and getting one of us or someone else to represent them and help them, it's just not going to get better. There's no reason that the owners are going to put themselves out on a limb or lock themselves into tighter contracts when there's no incentive. And right now the good guys are being good guys and the bad guys are being bad guys, and they're for the most part entirely unregulated.
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you suggest to, or which obstacles do you see for player unions? You all mentioned that you should have probably a union for every esports discipline out there, right? Like for every game. But then when you look at it, you have players across many nations out there and organizations. It's basically a global business, and we're pretty much in the transnational space. So usually if you have a union or an association, it's bound by national rules. It has to comply with national rules. And how would you... would you recommend to overcome that, or would you say we need a union for every country that is relevant, or how would you do it? There are examples of other industry spaces where trade unions tried to merge, and or they have a global head association, but what would you suggest?
I don't think it matters what country law it's under. I think what matters is we set up actually who's going to be overseeing these leagues, and if it's the leagues themselves, as something like ESL right now, then ESL needs to have a collective bargaining agreement, ideally, with the players in participating in ESL. The teams should be submitting player rosters. Those player rosters should be confirmed by ESL. And once those player rosters are confirmed, they should be considered in that player pool that's protected by that previously bargained agreement.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't matter if the player's in Germany or America or Japan, as long as they're all agreeing to be bound by the same rules of that same league for this instance. Obviously, international laws apply to the actual employment contract for the teams and things like that, but there's no reason that the union can't be not necessarily even maybe a union, but more just a players group collectively bargaining against the league that it's participating in.
Exactly. It just requires them to say, we're not going to join this league because you're not meeting standards X, Y, and Z. It really doesn't have a legal relevant to it in terms of whether or not they can or cannot do it. It's more just like a preference thing. And that's kind of what we're seeing now with the team associations that, or the cartel, as Roger calls it, that is being put in to effect now, too, with a bunch of teams for 2016.
Well, something else, this doesn't necessarily have to be, we can create a tier structured with this, so we can have similar to what soccer does or football for, our international contingent. But soccer has an overarching player union for the entire world. And that union, essentially, the members of that union are not just the individual players, but the varying soccer unions that exist by country. So, MLS's union is involved in that, as well as some of the other European soccer players' associations and so on.
Yeah,
and have that top tier structure kind of filter down the ideas, and you can create more globalized standards, or you can even create regionalized standards, however you want to do it, but it at least gives you some flexibility in that regard, and also then lends itself to be a little easier in terms of the legal organizing of the bodies themselves.
I think soccer is an excellent example, and you mentioned something very important, unions or associations or whatever you want to call them for collective bargaining usually require the participants to have the status as employee. And this is a topic that's quite complicated in esports because, let's be honest here, a lot of contracts don't treat players as employees.
Yeah, but I don't think that's complicated. I think that they're quite clearly employees, and that a lot of the teams are having their players under agreements calling them contractors, but once the IRS or whatever country's tax agency comes in and looks at that, they're going to laugh all the way to the misclassification pile.
Yeah, absolutely, it's true. But then how do you... I absolutely agree. But then you, for example, need to tackle... So I'm just devil's advocate here, okay? So
sure.
then you need to tackle the issue that different countries basically could come to different conclusions when it comes to the status of an employee. So many jurisdictions might agree that professional gamers in esports are employees. But what do you do if there are some, I have no idea about regulation in Brazil or statutory, laws.
I can tell you, there's not a country on the planet that's going to call an esports team member a contractor when they actually look at it. But at least not that I'm aware of. I've looked at a lot of factor tests. I've looked at a lot of different countries' rulings between the two or their equivalents in those countries. And I would be blown away if you found a country or even a state that would call these players contractors. They're every checkbox down the list is an employee. And when the easy solution here is it doesn't really matter. If they want to collectively bargain with the league, they need to sign something saying, okay, you're being hired officially. You are now an employee of this team. You're being approved by the league as an official player now in this league. And you're going to be bound by this collective bargaining agreement. And the second that all happens, it's the end of story. They're not going to be able to even try to claim that they're a contractor or the equivalent in whatever country. There's just absolutely... no way I can see that going any other way. It's just how it has to happen.
How do you think that will affect esports overall?
All it's going to do is legitimize things in the sense that the owners have to start doing what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah. These players aren't contractors; they're employees. And if you want to start an organization, which is a business, and you want to start that business, you have to do it right. I can't open a pizza store, call everybody a contractor, give them $2 an hour, and then send them home. There's rules, and those rules exist because these guys are making a living playing for your team. They're dedicating an insane amount of hours to your team and to your product and to your brand, and you have to compensate them correctly for that. And part of that is the proper classification.
I absolutely agree. I might add just a funny little story to that, because most recently I've asked a client, so what does your contract say? Does it say you're an independent contractor or are you an employee? And the answer was, I'm a player. I love that. Clearly my question was too technical about it, but I loved it. It's like, all I am is a player.
But the funniest part about that is so many of these agreements actually would probably call them player and never even say whether they're an employee or a contractor, which is a huge issue, obviously. It's as much as the players have zero representation, which of course isn't true. Some of them are obviously represented. That's how we're here. But a majority of them are not. And the same is true for some team owners, even of substantially large teams, that they might have had their trademark done by an attorney, but their employment contracts, they just took off Google and they changed a clause or two, and they make absolutely no sense. I saw one that was written under U.S. law. And for the non-lawyers here, that's not a thing. You can't write something under U.S. law. This
would be the same.
It's not the only occurrence,
Europe.
Apparently.
We have.
I got many.
We have so many jurisdictions. Please, you need to make your choice of law correctly.
Yeah, it's just absolutely insane. And then I've seen contracts that say if this player brings a clause, this entire contract's under New York law. If the team brings a claim, the entire contract's under German law. If the coach brings a claim, the entire contract's under Brazil law. That you can't do that. It's just top to bottom. The esports industry is running amok in a ridiculous fashion. Someone's going to lose a lot of money, or potentially even go to jail if it's one of the tournament buying cash kind of gambling situations. And then I think people will start to wake up. But until then, it's just the ridiculousness will continue.
2 points to raise to what Anna said about what do you think would happen to esports if it switched really to employees as opposed to the actual, or what they're currently doing, which is independent contractors. And I think that what the business reaction to that is you're going to see a lot of teams die out because they're not going to be able to sustain the financial burden of paying employees. Now, I say financial burden, I don't mean that it's a bad thing that they're employees by any stretch of the imagination. I think we would all agree that, these players certainly are employees and they should be treated and compensated as such. And another point to that, and this is, an extraordinarily nerdy lawyer point, there actually is an ongoing case right now, I forget which state, that's dealing with the formerly known as the Lingerie Football League, now known as the Legends Football League, where several members of the team are suing the team owner and the team business, saying that they are not actually independent contractors, but are employees. And that's currently pending, although I do think it speaks to a lot of the esports issues that are at hand. I'm certain that these contracts would look strikingly similar to many of the contracts that we've had the esteemed pleasure of working with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And under German law, for example, soccer players, they're employees. This has been decided, 30 years ago. It's pretty clear. Like, we have a lot of court decisions that are pretty clear. And the space has moved forward to, even more detailed questions that probably would destroy any other industry space where you don't have that much money. So, for example, in Germany, we're fighting in courts now about termination rights. So usually in soccer, people get older, they cannot run as fast as they used to, etc. So their contract gets terminated. If you're an employee in Germany, you cannot simply terminate a contract, especially if you've worked for quite some time for a company. So it's been recently decided that a soccer player cannot be terminated anymore. Of course, everybody's very concerned because this seems very odd regarding the whole industry structure. But of course, Bayern München, they can pay up, of course. But I wonder in esports.
Yeah, well, I mean, so to that point, if esports can't handle the financial bump of paying employees, which is not, to be clear to everyone watching, the pay of the players isn't going to change. The payment the players are getting is probably minimum wage sufficient in most cases. And the added costs of being an employee are things like health insurance and having to pay for sick days and things like that. And if esports can't afford that financial bump or that financial boost, then esports has no business pretending it's legitimate on any level. It's just not a thing then. We are the 200th most successful sport then. So there's just I just can't see that as a valid argument or concern.
And we are there, like esports. Sorry.
What about payments?
And Anna has to stop typing. It's destroying my ears.
Sorry. What about payments? Organizations need to make for the last years.
You mean back pay if they're misclass? Yeah. If they've misclass? Well, I mean that's a huge issue. To be fair, the owners doing things right have their players as employees. I've seen plenty of contracts where the players are employees. They're given benefits, they're given health insurance, they're given sick days. That's how this should be done. Even some of the owners I personally have issues with, they are considering their players employees and they're paying them properly. Some of the top teams, though, around who may or may not have just won international tournaments are calling their players contractors. So that's just not something that is okay. And yeah, if and when they get found as misclassifying their players, they are going to owe back pay, and they should. There's no lack of money there. There's a lack of ethics there. And that's a huge, huge concern to me. And it should be a huge concern to esports because the industry will not continue to grow positively without the players being taken care of properly.
Maybe I can just add, I think in a lot of cases, it's a problem of ethics, but there are some cases, where people just started their orgs, and I'm not telling you a naive story and about how esports grew and they had no idea, but they've started out with this little org paying a couple of $100s, to their players, and that works. As long as esports is not as big as it is today.
Yeah, but that doesn't sway me at all. Because if I start let's say I start a shop.
You should have done your due diligence, right?
It's not even due diligence. If your company grows or if your industry grows, you are owed new due diligence. Where if I started this little players org, but now my players are all winning tournaments and making a lot of money and growing substantially, I now need to realize that things have changed. We're making a lot more money, or more correctly, in how esports is going, the owner's making more money, not the players. And so I just don't feel bad that they didn't do things properly and are going to get screwed by it now. Some owners did do things properly. They should be rewarded and praised for that. And the owners that haven't should be mocked out of the industry. It's just gone on too long, honestly.
I agree, but I fear that half of the industry will disappear or take such a large hit that it's going to be a serious problem. I'm not defending it. I'm all for basically saying players are employees. You're completely right. But you have to acknowledge the fact that this is going to be a threat for the industry. And
I respectfully disagree. I don't think there's any legitimate organizations that can't survive the added cost of making their contractors employees, or even with the back pay owed. If it hurts the small organizations that disappear into the night, fine. I mean, who cares? If it's
Well,
the
that's no,
brand
like,
new organizations that
you
are
can't just dismiss smaller organizations though, because a lot of the smaller organizations are what
Mm.
end up becoming the bigger organizations. I mean,
not if they're
esports.
not doing things properly. It's their
Grooming
responsibility
talent.
to call an attorney and do things properly. If you want to start a business, that business has startup costs. Part of those startup costs are having an attorney and an accountant. And that attorney and accountant are going to make sure you're doing things properly. There are situations where a small new org can call their players contractors. Absolutely. I've personally put together organizations like that have 1 or 2 Hearthstone players and not much else, who are only working with the company 4 to 8 hours a week, and they're still streaming by themselves, making separate money and doing things. That is a contractor relationship. But the second that organization turns into something where they're making substantial money and that player is playing just for that organization and all that player's earnings are going to and through that organization, then you need to do things properly, or goodbye. I mean, get out of the industry. You're only hurting things.
I absolutely agree. So would you redirect some of the responsibility to league organizers, tournament organizers? I mean, we see, for example, Riot, looking very closely at organizations and if they behave according to their rule book. I mean, in traditional sports, usually, for example, in the German Bundesliga, if a club cannot basically act professional, so they don't have in order their financials or their contracts or whatever, they're out of the league. Do you think that should be done, for example, in esports as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I think
I'll
so
let,
too.
let's let Roger take a swing. We've been yelling at each other for 20 minutes.
No, thank you, Ryan. But I absolutely do agree. I do think there is substantial more responsibility that the leagues need to take on, and really, we haven't seen any sort of responsibility on a former league aside from really Riot, and Riot still could do so much more to improve. Oh, sorry about that. Could do so much more to improve its situation with its teams and its owners, and really to protect everyone involved. And the impression that I've gotten, at least, in working in this industry and getting to see some of the things that go on behind closed doors, is that the leagues don't want to be bothered. They have the money, they have the time, but they don't want to deal with it. And we have the situation of effectively Riot becoming a massive PR and marketing machine, and the sport of League of Legends itself really taking a back seat. And it's sad, because at the end of the day, that's what's propelling the industry forward as a whole, and they could stand to do so much better in protecting
and Riot. Yeah, sorry,
players as well.
Yeah, and Riot, like you said, is not doing a great job, but they're at least doing anything. I mean, you look at Valve with Dota or Blizzard with Heroes; they might as well absolutely not exist. And then we run into the further issue of, is League of Legends are we negotiating with Riot as a league, or are we negotiating with ESL, or should there be both, or should there be a third and a fourth and a fifth? There's just so many issues that need to be hammered out, and will be hammered out by economics before this can grow to the next level, before this gets actual airtime, before this is actually a self-sustaining industry. These kind of things have to happen. That's why, I mean, you can't be concerned with hurting all these mom and pop organizations and mom and pop league structures when they're just they're continuing this bad tradition of not taking care of their players properly and not taking care of the industry properly, which is just holding everything back. There needs to be a real idea of who's the league, who's the players, who's the teams, and an agreement and at least a minimum bar for everything.
Well,
otherwise, there's going to be
I think
also that. Oh, go on, Mike. I'm sorry.
Go for it, Roger. Continue it out.
I was going to say, no, I think that, yes, I do agree with this, with the sentiment that teams should have their affairs in order, legally, financially speaking, and so on, at whatever size, however big, however small. But I also do think that knowing the industry and knowing how a lot of people start forming teams, I do think that there is an extreme lack of knowledge on a large part. Now, that's not to say that that's their fault and, economic Darwinism, But my larger point is that, you know, leagues can have rules in place that say you need to have X, Y, and Z in order to be accountable, in order to be a member of this league, and so on, and enforce that from the top down. And that way, you don't have a choice but to follow their lead and but to follow those rules.
A million times over, I agree with you. I think that's the only way these smaller organizations and the larger organizations are going to play ball correctly and realize they should be having attorneys draft their agreements and meeting these minimum thresholds. You look at League, I don't know how many people watching have seen a League of Legends contract, but there's a lot of forms kind of at the end of the contract that say just minimum questions that the player needs to know and that need to be answered in that agreement, such as can the player be traded, can the player reject the trade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these different questions that need to be answered that Riot has put in that contract to make sure are answered. But no other league or game company has done that. And I mean, even that is not a great minimum threshold. It's just something.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I would like to add that Riot is in the position to take care of it. They've chosen monopoly in their league. It's all controlled by them. And it's also in their interest. I mean, having a good structure that complies with legal rules, it's sustainable. If you have employment contracts for every player, nothing is going to hurt your league structure from a legal point of view. Why not take care of it, for example?
Yeah, because right now no one's watching them and they don't care because they're making a lot of money.
Yep.
Somebody will come after somebody. I think something with gambling is going to happen probably first with something like Dota 2 Lounge or CSGO Lounge, where people are basically gambling with real money through the lens of virtual goods that have real world value, and that's why they're doing it. Someone's going to go to jail.
Ryan, how do you think that like the FanDuels and DraftKings thing it's going on right now is going to affect esports the way that goes down?
There's going to be major cases. What'd you say, Roger?
Maybe explain what's going on for the viewers.
Yeah, so basically daily esports have taken over fantasy football and fantasy baseball and things like that, where instead of playing for an entire season, you pick a different lineup every day and you play that way. And it's jumped over to esports as well, where FanDuel and DraftKings has started putting esports content into it and making people able to bet on esports. The problem is they're betting on esports. And what is that? Oh, that's
the problem. Is gambling. In my honest opinion, it's straight out freaking gambling.
Well, so the rule in America anyway, in most states, is gambling is determined by whether or not it's a luck-based game or a skill-based game. For whatever reason, arbitrarily almost, poker has been held as kind of the creme de creme of luck-based games. And fantasy sports have been held as the creme de creme of skill-based games. So why is a fantasy sport skill when poker is luck, when there's both such a random element to both? I don't know. But right now, that's basically what's going on. And I need to mute this or something. My headphones are going crazy. I don't know. Sorry.
Okay.
Unprofessional of me. Roger, take over.
There's so much professionalism in this room. I don't think anyone's really going to care, Ryan. Just throwing that out there. So obviously, a lot of this stuff can be fixed by creating a players' union. And in traditional sports, we've seen players' unions take long times to be able to be created, and a lot of it is done through strikes and through lockouts. I saw someone earlier in Twitch chat mention it. If we do an esports association, if there's a player association that comes along, is there going to be strikes? Is that something that's inevitable?
Inevitable, yes, just because of the fact that it's difficult enough to get two parties to agree on the entirety of a collective bargaining agreement. So sooner or later, that would I would expect that to happen. But I completely agree that it does generally take a very long time in order for a union to develop, and we've only seen in the last 40, 50 years, I think a perfect example of this is Major League Baseball's unionization in the 60s. It took a lot of players starting to fight for their rights. That's when the birth of basically the player agent occurred, and they were really just lawyers representing players. And a lot of teams, much like we're seeing with esports, refusing to deal with players if they had any representation at any stage of their career. And it essentially took one player, Kurt Flood, to martyr his career and take a case to the Supreme Court of the United States, which he lost, but was sent back for arbitration and won the arbitration case, which was the birth of essentially free agency, and the union was highly tied into that. So there's a long way to go. I mean, this is not a quick and easy process. And like I said before, I think we need to see a greater collective identity amongst the players in wanting to fight for their rights, at least in terms of just a greater percentage.
Yeah, and I think that lockouts are inevitable as well, and I think that's a really big issue in terms of being able to get it, and why I think that it's going to take a fairly decent amount of time before the ball to start getting a roll. I mean, you're looking at players now outside of CS:GO, oddly, which I still don't understand. I think the lifespan for pro players is like maybe 5 years max. Like, it's not that much, right? For some reason in CS:GO they play for like decades and they're just like perfectly fine. But and they're damn good at it too.
Yeah, Adderall.
Yeah. Oh. Anyway, and so I think that a lot of these players, especially because they're young, 18 to 23 maybe, and they don't want to, get into esports just for a year later to be like, yeah, let's strike for 2 years, and then I don't have an esports career anymore. Like they're not. I mean, they're dedicated. They want to do it, but they're not that dedicated, right? They want to see esports grow, but they much more want to be able to participate in it. So I feel like that's going to take a really long time to develop just for that reason, right?
But on the other hand, a strike doesn't have to be 2 years long.
Sure.
Not participating in one major, for example, or just, threatening going on strike for one major would cause a big disruption. And that would be the kind of leverage that gets this collective bargaining process going. If players don't show up for a major, there will be a lot of losses, and everybody will watch that kind of process. So I could imagine that this could get them somewhere. In my opinion, in CSGO, the players are far further down the road when it comes to unionization and organizing, but still, there are a lot of challenges. And one you mentioned that is quite serious is they all need to get on board with the idea of a union. And with any kind of democratic process you have, players need to be fine to have some kind of frustration that sometimes their sole opinion isn't mirrored in the decisions a union takes. And I think that frustrates especially young, idealistic people, and that could be some kind of obstacle as well.
I agree. And you see that's something that you see in any professional sports union. Just because they even already have a union doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to agree with the stance that the union takes on specific matters, which is something that's going to be very difficult to overcome when you figure the average age of these people involved, which is probably 17 to 25.
Yeah,
so,
and also where they come from, For example, if you have a discussion about, let's say, minimum wage, right? We had this discussion all over Reddit. There were a lot of statements. Of course, if you're let's say 1% that is really successful at the game, you don't need minimum wage. Nobody cares. You make a ton of money out of prize money if it gets paid. And to you, sorry about that. And you're happy. You don't need a union to represent you. Maybe you need the union to make sure you get the money, but they can help with that. But when it comes to find an agreement, it can be quite hard, and the discussion can turn quite harsh at some point. And in my experience, it's almost impossible to agree on those matters. And you know what's happening? Like they come together, maybe they agree on a statement when they meet, and then once the statement is out, you lose the base, you lose the foundation, because like half of it will say like, no, this is not what I'm thinking. This is not my opinion, right? And if that happens, if it breaks apart, and that's highly likely, you're not going to basically accomplish anything with that. And it's quite hard. You need people who are charismatic and able to be on top of things, and who are liked and can basically, go somewhere with this ship called player union. It's hard.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this is also so 10 steps down the road. I think first things first is what Roger said earlier. The leagues really, not the leagues, the game companies really need to say, listen, if you want to run a league in this game, or if you want to participate as an owner in a team in this game, here's what you have to do. Here's what you have to follow. It's infuriating with things like with what just happened with Renegades, where certain rules are seemingly arbitrarily enforced at such a severe degree. Meanwhile, they don't even make sure that players are getting paid minimum wage. Or paid their tournament winnings. So where the priorities are is absolutely ridiculous to me. How tampering is the worst crime that exists in esports, according to Riot, is just very silly. I just don't agree with it. I think that Chris has done a lot of good for esports, and it's a shame that in an act that every single owner I've dealt with does, which is tampering and trying to poach players. It's a shame that now he is removed from esports when I feel he was such a positive influence on the community. And I know I haven't been on the league subreddit. I don't even know if that's I assume that's not the popular opinion, but
no,
regardless,
absolutely not. They rip you to shreds there.
I don't
this
care.
kind of opinion. Yeah, I've been there. Trust me, it's not popular.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I know I've seen the contracts he's been involved with, and I've seen the contracts people that are held on pedestals have put out. And I know who is really charismatic and who can win over Reddit, and I know who's actually looking out for the players and being a good guy. And maybe those aren't always the same thing, but in my very limited dealings with Chris and seeing what he's done and worked on, I've seen nothing but good things. And every single owner I've dealt with or talked to or know about has taken part in tampering and tankering and poaching players. That's just an unfortunate reality right now that exists. I don't even know if it's unfortunate, but it exists, and it's that's just how it is. And the fact that this is the rule that we're deciding to bring the hammer down on so fiercely is absolutely insane to me.
Well,
by the way, for our viewers that don't understand the legal jargon, tampering is technically what Riot calls poaching.
What would you say?
I said tampering is technically what Riot calls poaching.
And poaching
I had a
very egg in the morning, so now we're all on board.
Yeah, it's basically what it means is you talk to players who are under contract with another team and you say, hey, you could have a way better deal with my team. Come on over. Should that be allowed? Probably not. Does it happen with every single owner? Yes. So the fact that that's being dealt with like this, but they're not dealing with teams not paying their players properly, or not sharing tournament winnings, or not giving housing they say they're going to, or whatever else you want to do, I don't understand where the line is, other than it seems like maybe Chris wasn't so loved.
So to kind of
also
definitely true.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Anna.
Also, maybe it's important, for the viewers just to get an idea how the industry is structured and how team organizers and players come together. Usually at big tournaments, everybody is in the same room. Everybody drinks at the after party together. Everybody walks at some point, through masses of players. And what I've witnessed is sometimes just, even players going to other team owners and starting weird conversations, some drunk, some sober. So what is, in this space, when you start talking about poaching and the right behavior, it seems nobody even knows what that means. The players, maybe, team owners, they should know. But a lot of players, I think they have no idea.
And that kind of stuff would definitely not be allowed. I mean, in the NFL, for example, if two players are drinking with a coach on another team, they can't ask, hey, what are your guys getting paid? Can we switch with these benefits, blah, blah, blah. But it's not even that with esports. They're quite literally sending formal letters on letterhead saying, here is our offer if you want to leave your team and come here. And they're all doing that. It's not just Chris. It's not just two teams. It's everybody's doing that. I'm sure there's owners that don't. I don't know them. But
let's talk about solving this. So the way that the professional sports leagues have handled it, because tampering is something that's treated incredibly seriously in pro sports.
Absolutely. It's considered a threat to the infrastructure.
Absolutely. And the way it's handled is usually through massive fines and the loss of draft picks and so on. So it's not something to be taken lightly, especially if you're in a sport where your draft picks matter, like the NFL. But the way a lot of the tampering issues have been resolved is simply through education, which at the end of the day, I think we can all say that education, at the very least, which would be on the player side, provided by a player union, or on the team side, should be provided by the league itself. That when you are fully aware of what you can and cannot do, it is much easier to avoid these situations, and as Anna's, I completely agree with Anna's statement that, everyone is in the same room, especially as small as an industry as esports is, even though it's global. Everyone knows everyone, everyone goes to the after party, and yes, things get said, but at the end of the day, they shouldn't be, so, and that's the thing you see a lot more with the pro athletes, where they say if they are approached by, whoever, let's say there's a wide receiver who runs into Jerry Jones, who's the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, at a party, and it's, oh, hey, I would love to have you come play for my team next year. And the player's response should be nothing else than talk to my agent.
Roger said, talk to my agent. I think his internet cut out.
Yeah.
A little bit. He cut out with
He's
a
frozen
very
now.
serious face, though. Oh, there he goes. Okay. He had this face on. He's like, damn right, you better talk to your agent. Like, that was the face you left with.
Yeah, and I mean, the money is not necessarily a great example, as someone in Pukar in chat pointed out that, yeah, of course, in the NFL, most contracts are public in terms of numbers and what's guaranteed and what's salary. But in esports, that's not the case. And it doesn't matter if it is or isn't. You can talk about anything. In the NFL, you're just not allowed to try to incentivize people to come play for you when they're under contract with another team, except for, of course, a couple of exceptions. And the same should be true in esports. I'm not saying I'm pro-poaching or pro-tampering. I'm saying where Riot and these other leagues are arbitrarily picking and choosing what rules they're going to enforce and what ones they're not, when we're not enforcing such simple rules as paying your players when they win a tournament, it just seems utterly ridiculous to me that we're handing out such severe punishments filled with when there's so many owners doing so much worse.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in public.
There's one point of the Badawi issue that we didn't touch on, which was the fact that this was all imposed on him, and he wasn't even in the league yet.
Then, I mean, that's
even more ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
Even more ridiculous. The thing is, it's just, facepalm. It's just bad. It's bad from the start to the end, and it's a sad story. I think it hurt Riot. It hurt Riot's credibility in the space. It was overall a bizarre story. I cannot say anything else. I mean, we can go into legal details how this is binding an individual or whatever. But in the end, it's a disaster, and I completely agree with Ryan. That was just bad and ridiculous.
Well, to kind of jump on off of this to a question that we actually got from Twitch chat and on Reddit by Coach, I believe, who would probably be very excited because he's been talking about it the entire time. And apparently with the Chris ruling, there was a changing in the ruling where originally he wasn't allowed to participate in LCS events, and then it switched to Riot-affiliated competitions, I believe was the phrasing they used. And so I believe Coach's question was, what really stops, if anything, Riot from retroactively changing these rulings and these rules? And there he is, that's him. What stops them from retroactively changing these rules to affect people behind them like it did for Chris?
Nothing.
Can I give word?
I mean, sorry.
It's the first word that Ryan said. It's nothing.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, League has no contract with anyone that they're not in control of. League has full authority to do whatever they want because there is no league, there is no players union, there is no collectively bargained anything from anyone. So League can just tomorrow say, oh, by the way, we're shutting down every other league that even has League of Legends tournaments because we're not going to license our property to them anymore. We're in control of it. So right now, yeah, they could make Chris wear a tutu and dance around in the middle of the city if they want. There is no limitations on what they can do. They can change rulings. They can kick people out, invite people in. They're completely untouchable right now in terms of if you want to play League of Legends.
Maybe I can chime in here because in Germany we take things a little more severe, more strictly. And, usually a lot of stuff that happens in leagues is subject to arbitration, which means you're not going to argue in court. There's an arbitration process. And in Germany, we have these rulings about arbitration in traditional sports where it says, listen up, if your outcome of the arbitration process is so unfair that it is just outrageous, we're gonna, screw you over. We're gonna say this is an invalid outcome. You need to go back. You have to have due process, for example, and you need to treat everybody participating in a fair manner. And for example, if Chris Badawi, if that happened in Germany, there's no way a German court wouldn't have ruled like, you know what, Riot, this is not okay. This outcome is
Wait, I don't think that's respectfully, Riot controls their IP. Riot controls everything people are doing with League right now. It's not an open league where Chris is has any power. This is Riot owning League of Legends, saying we're going to allow League of Legends tournaments to exist like this, and if you don't follow our rules, we're going to not allow you. It's a completely revocable license on their part that they can revoke for any or no reason, and it seems that's what they did here.
So you only focus on the IP part then.
I think that's all there is to focus on. I think Riot owns League of Legends, and they can say who can touch it and who can't. It's not like football. That's an idea. This is an actual game and product that they own.
So the way it works here in the U.S. is if you are not collectively bargained, you are allowed to essentially rule make, which would be issuing a decision, creating rules, and so on, as you see fit. You are a closed organization. You can do what you want as far as those determinations are concerned. Now, the way that's not the case with the NFL or MLB or any of the sports leagues is that because they are collectively bargained, they are then subject to administrative law. And administrative law brings with it all of these challenges that people can make to challenge the rulings. And the basic premise for challenging that ruling is, was this rulemaking arbitrary and capricious? That's the specific language. That's the burden in a sense. And which is something. And taking this back to the initial topic, once you have a players organization involved, you do have to collectively bargain. And then as soon as you have collective bargaining in place, that means that they are subject to administrative law, and their rulings can be challenged.
Well, but
so,
with whom do they bargain? With Riot? Because here you have 3 parties. It's a little different from the usual structure where you have 2 parties. So just asking.
That's huge. That's the huge issue here, and I think that it's one that's getting overlooked a lot. Not by you guys because you've each brought it up, but I think as an industry as a whole is that imagine if the NFL and the players union also had to negotiate with the person who owned the football. And that's basically what we have here. We have Riot, who owns the football, and then we have the league, so let's say ESL, and then we have the teams and players. So and for what it's worth, that's even a 4th party, because at least the NFL is the teams. Here, we have the players, we have the teams, we have the league, and we have the game. So that's 4 parties butting heads here with all different interests and different wants. Only 2 of those parties are represented, and the 4th, and one of them just is in La La Land taking in infinite paychecks and not caring about anything. So it's certainly nothing that's going to get fixed tomorrow. It's certainly nothing that's going to get fixed anytime soon. But what I am sick of hearing, and again, not that you guys said it, but just in general, I keep hearing it as a defense, is that, esports is young, we're figuring it out, it's growing pains. How long are we going to say that and pretend that everything's just fine as it is? We need to start acting like an industry and acting like grown-ups here. You can only be a baby in your infancy for so long. We're getting streamed on ESPN. We're selling out major arenas. We're having $1 million prize pools. We're not 2 years old anymore. This is now grown-up stuff, and it's time we all start acting like it, for lack of a less angry way of saying it.
But let's be honest. How is it that these industries grow up? And that's usually through people like us suing the shit out of them.
Right.
In one way or another. Businesses, especially ones that are making a ton of money, aren't going to change out of, this idealistic moral choice to better the industry and to make the world a happy place. They're only going to do it when they're forced into it. And the only way they're going to be forced into it is when there is a sufficiently high court and probably several appeals courts above that tell them they have to make changes.
Or the tax authorities move in,
Yeah, the IRS might do this for us. When they come in and realize everybody's misclassified, they might start looking at how these tournament payouts are going, which is not accurate. And then, of course, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. There's going to be a player who switches team when they shouldn't, or something like these poaching charges, and that's a potential suit. Or gambling infringements with real jail time, which is also running rampant in esports right now. There's so many different ways so many people can get screwed, and no one's really that worried about it. There are, of course, us and several other attorneys working in the industry, Bryce Bloom and Josh Purewall and people like that, but it's not like there's 100 attorneys here. It's not like there's an army of people focused on this stuff. And for what it's worth, as many attorneys work in this industry, there's a lot more unrepresented players and teams that don't care. So until there starts to be some scary headlines coming down here and there, it's just not going to change.
So we got to start suing people is what you're saying.
That's right.
Winner sue. That's the rule, right? So obviously we have to start doing something, right? And people are starting to try to do some things. Player associations, in my mind, and I would like to think that you guys would agree, should be started by the players, should be ran by the players, should be, developed by the players and organized by the players. But we have a lot of non-players trying to make and push organizations and associations, and one of the more recent ones was Richard Lewis's idea of creating some sort of a player association. Now, my understanding, and I know you definitely know this, Anna, so I want to get your opinion on this for sure, but my understanding of the way that he wants to go about it, which I don't think is a bad idea, I want to state that, but I don't think, and I think you agree, it's not a players association. It's more like a players welfare union, in the sense that it would appear as just like, well, if you don't get paid, the union will pay you instead. And if you need an attorney, well, the union will pay for an attorney and get you to get your money that the team owner wasn't paid and stuff like that. And if you're hurt, the union will have a doctor, and it just gets to this point where. At what point does the union just start paying for the players to play, right? That's
I have a quick side question to
Well,
shoot for it.
Is Richard Lewis in charge of this union in his design? And if
Yes.
so, what percentage of these dues does he get?
In Richard Lewis's idea, and I don't believe that it's his intention, and I know it's not his intention to stay in charge, but the idea was to put him in charge for like 3 months to get the ball rolling, as he would
Didn't
put
Caesar say that?
Yeah.
Caesar, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
To get
I'll
the
just be
ball
emperor
rolling.
for a day. I swear, I'll give the crown back tomorrow.
And
but also,
then,
I get 30% of all dues collected,
Yeah.
and we're going to make it a really difficult process to claim insurance if you don't get paid. So,
to be fair, I don't think that's his intention, but I'm not ruling that out as a possible outcome. But yeah, basically he wanted to be involved, and then 3 months later he wanted the players to vote them out. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that too. That's pretty much how I feel.
nothing against Richard Lewis, but that's absolutely insane to me as a solution.
Agreed. I think it gets dangerous, and that's my biggest concern. Whenever you do have a union rep, that union rep should be someone that, is incredibly knowledgeable about the space. That's a given. Should understand the legal ins and outs of the goings on, or at least should have a hell of a team behind him that do, as well as someone who is, you have to be well liked, by both parties.
You're not going to be well liked with that kind of job. That's guaranteed.
No.
I know, but you have to
I think Hotbed should do it.
You think who should do it, right?
Hotbed, the guy who does eSports Express. He has his finger on the pulse.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, God. That threw me off. Well, anyway, what I want to say about this. First off, I think Richard Lewis is very good at stirring public opinion. And I feel
against himself.
as well, right? Agreed. But I think at the moment he's doing a very good job basically getting attention to this kind of subject. I'm not even sure if these, whatever premises you just talked about, I'm not even sure if this is really part of it or if this is just the Richard Lewis shenanigan to, get players going with the subject. I am not so sure if this is really the plan here, but it's creating attention, and I think attention is good. I also think the representative should be a player, but look around. We have only a handful of players who have a sense for business or a sense for representation or politics, and this is a huge amount of weight you have on your shoulders if you agree to this kind of job. And I see, if you agree to do this, you're willing.
But where's the line with this Richard Lewis one too? What if it's a no-name organization that has their own tournament for $10,000 and then oops, I didn't pay everybody? Do they get to collect out of this too because they paid dues for a month? The entire system seems ridiculous. I
don't think it makes any sense. Also,
and nothing against. I just want to clarify that truly, I have nothing against Richard Lewis. I've spoken to him before. He's a nice guy. I just know that he's a very polarizing person in esports, and I think he's the last person that should be in charge of a union.
Yeah. Well, maybe not the last. I can
not for any negative claims against him, other than 1 week he has 1 million people after him with pitchforks, and the next he's being lifted up on the rafters. It's you just there's too many. When you're that involved with headlines, I just don't think that's the person for the job. He can do a lot of good for the players. He can do a lot of public publicity. He can do a lot of publicity for this union and things like that. But should he be the one in charge of it? Probably not. It should be a player with business sense that gets voted in by his fellow players.
Yes, absolutely.
How about instead of one person, we have a council? When you look at pro sports,
one from every sport.
Not even one from every sport. You have one from every. You have several from every sport. One per team.
That's what I meant. One from every game for the union. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a collective of a player rep from every team that's going to be involved in their union activities. You know, that's something that we see heavily in pro sports. Every team has their pro union. Every team has their union rep. And that union rep is the one that speaks on behalf of their team and their concerns. And they're really the ones that have the pulse on, you know, the however many players are you know, with them on the sidelines, so to speak.
Yeah, I totally agree. But, oh, he's cutting out. He's still talking, isn't he?
He finished for me.
Okay. No, but look at his picture. He's still talking. I'm so sorry.
Every now and then he just stands still just to confuse you, but he's still there.
I'm so sorry.
It's the lag switch.
Sorry. No, but I just looked at your picture and now I don't know what to say anymore. Yeah, what I wanted to say, my point was, look at esports and its structure. You're going to face huge problems with that, with that kind of approach. I mean, in comparison, in soccer or whatever league you're going to look at, you maybe have like 30 players per team. Here, you have 5 players. And look around, you'll find a lot of teams where no player would be willing to be part of a council. And I think maybe it's better to get them in a room and they look around and there will be a few popular figures who are willing to be part of a council. And I think that's also better because, you know, players switch teams like that. And you have a lot of player movement. And it's probably better to rely on certain people for a longer period of time, disregarding the team.
Yeah, and they're SP91 and Coach Sarkis are talking about it in the chat, which is related to this, that Riot has been holding workshops to kind of teach their players and professionalize the industry a bit. And Valve is doing the same on a much smaller scale from how I understand it. But of course, who knows what they're doing.
It's very different. Maybe I can... Oh, yeah, this is right down my alley. So, of course. Okay, look at this. So how does Riot do their great workshops? It's all about PR. There are no legal issues discussed. There are no, you know... This is only about PR. Like, you know, when you look at the player Twitters, when they go to those workshops, all they're going to do, you're going to notice a lot more selfies for the next week because they're told, like, you know, take a lot of selfies, interact with your fans. So this is what this is about. I think Valve is taking a better approach. We talk about Jazz. He has been giving at the last major a presentation on legal issues in esports contracts for all participants. And I mean, the presentation is online. You can look it up. Just, you know, scroll down his Twitter. It's very well done. And I think it's great. I think Valve takes a much better approach at this. They've given it a lot of thought how to improve the infrastructure, and it's about education, as we all agree. And they're willing to educate participants in their game on all sides: business side, legal side, PR side. And I think that's a better approach, full stop.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely great. And I know what Josh has been doing, too. That's something I wish would happen in a lot more sports more consistently. I just think, you know, any effort is good right now. It's better than nothing. And I'm happy to see Valve's doing it more properly then.
You seem to have lost Roger's video, which is okay.
Bye, Roger.
I don't think anyone minds.
No.
I'm not fixing the screen,
Roger.
so you'll have to deal with Ryan being on 2 things at once, which I'm sure he's very happy about. I know it's getting late in Europe, so I don't want to keep you guys too long, especially Anna. So let me turn to a quick subject, and then we'll take some questions a little bit. So about the team association that has apparently cropped up, or the Roger Cartel, which has been deemed, in my opinion. How do you guys feel about that? We have a lot of teams organizing to essentially write a list of demands of this is what we need for these certain esports at these certain competitions, and if these certain competitions aren't meeting those requirements, we're not going to participate. Is that something that is beneficial to esports? Is that something that's going to hurt it in the long run? My personal question is, do you guys think that all the teams are going to actually stick to that if it's a little close and someone might be able to get an advantage by completely dissing the contract to keep going into the tournament? Just saying.
Right, exactly. So, Evil Genius isn't showing up, so we won't either, guys. Swear. And we're here. You know,
yeah, this also happens with Olympics, in China and the like. Yeah, everybody's showing up who's interested in prize money and prestige.
Is that what we're to expect from this then?
Yeah, I don't think there is anything to expect from this. I don't think it's going to be followed. I think it's going to be by the wayside soon. Hopefully, it's a stepping stone to the correct path, which is actual good guidelines and requests that these teams want, these players want, and these leagues are going to give. It's happening with things like drug testing even. There's just starting to be more professionalism in the sport and in the industry. And teams demanding things is not bad necessarily if it's categorically beneficial for the industry. But you have to see how much they're taking advantage of things and how much they're asking for. And I have not done that yet, but that's where the line is, whether or not they're being ridiculous in their requests and malicious, or if they're doing something that, hey, our players should be given a proper accommodation in a waiting area between matches or things like that.
Here's another question I have for you. So we're talking about Counter-Strike at the moment, but just imagine for one moment, which is hard to imagine because it seems owners in League of Legends are much more closer to Riot than owners are, in CSGO to Valve. But just imagine a moment they get together and they have several interests that overlap. What would they want from Riot? What do you think?
If the league owners got together against Riot?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? I can't guess what their demands would be, but I think there's a lot they could ask for that are not bad things to ask for. Whether it's just getting more uniformity in what the teams have to offer the players, what needs to be in those agreements between the players and teams, and even just a guarantee that, hey, if you participate in this league, you'll be treated as a member of this league, and you won't be kicked out or brought in willy-nilly, and just a little more regulation and oversight on what is acceptable and what's not. As many rule books as they have right now, there's still a lot of question marks on what you can and can't do. And as we've seen, there's retroactive punishment and things like that, and it's not great. So, I'm not opposed to them asking for something like that.
So what do you think about? I think, for example, when you look at League of Legends and different regions, that you have a competition issue there. So, for example, if you have employees in the European region, there's a lot more money you need to pay in order to comply with regulation than in the US, for example. I mean, I know health insurance, it has changed over in the US, we know, but I still think there is a disadvantage in regions. So, for example, do you think Riot should be responsible for preventing NA teams raiding EU rosters? I mean, I'm quoting here a quite popular owner who has stated that this is going to happen in the future probably because the EU region has just a huge disadvantage. What do you think?
I didn't hear the exact thing you wanted to have them demand.
Basically raising their stipend. Or
raising the players' stipend?
Yeah, for example, that could be a solution to the problem, to to basically resolve competitive issues you have because they've chosen, certain locations for the league.
I'm not. Roger, you want to take that one?
I'm a little lost myself too.
Yeah, I didn't quite follow the question there, but I think it was just a connection issue because you lagged out a millisecond. But
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's but yeah, I mean, I think the overall thing you were bringing up is that it's fine that it's not that there has to be a categorical yes or no. Should Riot be involved internationally with every single thing? I think it's more, should Riot be involved with making sure that this esports product as a whole is as best as it can be? And the answer is yes. It should be watching out for the players. It should also be watching out for the teams. It should be making sure that the league tournaments that are going on don't go as disastrously as was a dream. What just happened in a few weeks ago in Europe? That was a disaster. All the players were not brought in properly, and there wasn't accommodations, and just
please,
Dream. It doesn't matter, but it was terrible and universally terrible. Everyone there was embarrassed to be there, and that's so detrimental to esports. So until those things are fixed, which can be fixed by Riot and by Valve and by Blizzard, it's meaningless to argue about little things like should they be looking out for how many pieces of M&Ms they get in their waiting room. There's a much bigger picture to look at here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Paradise.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was the one. Sorry, DreamHack.
Did you say DreamHack?
Ryan
yeah, but
it.
I didn't mean DreamHack.
Only Ryan
Dream in paradise. You dream you're in a paradise.
DreamHack in Cluj-Napoca. It was wonderful. My first visit to Romania. Loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's basically what it is. Until those kind of disasters stop happening, it's those holes need to be plugged before you can start building a bigger ship. You need to figure out exactly where the industry is going, and a big part of that is, are these game creators and owners going to be involved, or are they just going to license the product to a league like ESL and say have fun? It looks like with things like the International being the one tournament, even though there are other Dota leagues, it looks like they're not stepping to the side. So they need to then have better control on their product.
Well, it raises the question of whether or not what would be in the best interest of them doing so. Obviously, from a business perspective, the developer is going to want to hold on to their IP as much as possible, which we're seeing Riot do currently. But, is it in the best interest of the sport to license out the IP to a separate league? To even if you want to create it like a more prototypical sports league structure, where you do have the teams involved at every level, and then you can maybe have a better shot at forming a player union and growing it out that way.
Is licensing out better for Riot, not better for the sport?
Absolutely not.
Well, yeah, that's the clear answer to that question.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah, and I think that business people will speak to this better than I will, but there's certainly something to be said about the ease of a developer being able to license its product out at an extraordinarily high amount, mind you, and to forego all of the operating costs that they would incur by actually running a league and so on.
Yeah.
That it could be numerically beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, and please don't rip me apart of that, but I'm a fan of how Valve does it in CSGO, because they basically rely on the market. And what you see in secondary markets, such as tournaments, you have a huge competition going on at the moment. We still don't know how the structure is going to be next year. ESL, Turner League, others are talking about, getting together, organizing kind of a Grand Prix, as you have in Formula One. Then you have DreamHack, etc. You have all these players in the market for tournaments, and I think it's good. Competition is good for the market. It brings in money. It brings better conditions. It's I think it is much better than what Riot does at the moment.
But I mean, at the same time, it's not necessary. You can look at with the NFL again, not to keep going back to that, but look at the XFL. The XFL came out; it was a disaster. The NFL had all the good talent, and they had them under exclusive contracts, which is definitely going to happen eventually in esports. You're not going to be able to play for ESL and its competitor. It already exists with MLG having a lot of people specifically under their contracts, and things like that. So when that happens and all the best players are in the same league like they are in the NFL, something like the XFL can never exist. No one wants to watch such an inferior product. It's like watching me play Dota, which is just not as fun.
What something that was interesting was the USFL, which, for those that don't know, was a football league that started up to run during the NFL's off season.
It was like
last
year, right, or 2 years ago, right?
No. This was a while ago. This was before 2000. They tried to resurrect it. They tried to resurrect it last year, but I don't think that went well. But needless to say, the USFL was actually for a few years. A certain intrepid team owner by the name of Donald Trump decided to challenge the NFL directly and run their games on Saturday during the regular season. Saturday or Friday, I forget. But needless to say, went season for season with the NFL, and it dissolved completely.
And that's what happens. I just don't see there being room for 70 leagues in esports for a game. So, as it stands right now, we have a few leagues with a few exclusivity deals, and we have the product owners licensing their product to these different leagues and different tournaments. And I think there's going to be uniformity abroad, and there's going to be a good idea of who's allowed to play where and how long and when. And when that happens, who's to say what the first little baby step's going to be towards professionalism here? But whether it's going to have to come from the product owner, which is Riot or Valve or Blizzard, before the teams do anything, because there's no pressure on them to do it.
Well, on that note, let me ask you guys one more really quick question, and we'll take some questions from the Q&A. Very simple question.
I have a call with someone we just were talking about actually in 15 minutes, so I have to run in 10.
Okay, that's fine. So really super duper quick question. How long until an esports association actually gets made? Guesstimate.
8 years.
I was going with
what
6.
What kind of
a player association?
Player association. What do you mean? Like just a get together where players leverage their muscle and their
some form of collective bargaining. Let's call it that.
Okay, so it doesn't have to comply with legal rules, but there's some kind of collective bargaining.
Yeah, ideally it would, but yeah.
So I say Counter-Strike, 1 year.
Wow.
Not longer.
Okay.
1 year it's gonna take. Yeah. Others, I don't know. I don't think, for example, in Riot, in League of Legends, never. I don't know, but how they handle people in their esports rulings. I don't think anybody dares to go up against Riot at this point. Sorry.
All right, Roger, thoughts?
Yeah, I say 5 years.
5 years?
5 years, yeah. Before we start seeing some actual headway made. I think before that we are gonna see some stops and starts, but it's gonna take a lot of time, and some people will be very willing to be unpopular, and that may cost some careers in the process.
And I think that's the hardest part. And I hope, Anna, I really do hope that you're right. A CS:GO association year would be amazing, but I can't have my hopes that high at the moment.
I don't think any of the esports we currently watch are going to ever have a union. I think the next wave of esports might come in and do it right.
Fair. All right. Well, let's look at some questions here. right off the bat, we got one from Reddit from Alpha Ferg. He says, what are the biggest hurdles in aligning esports to traditional sports, and should we even be considering that as a goal, or is it better to be different for esports? What do you guys think?
I'll take
I think
this
we
one
touched. Sure, yeah.
Quick answers. Nothing too
Sure. I think the biggest hurdles is the fact that the product is inherently different. Esports exists as an entirely digital platform, whereas traditional sports is much more conceptual and occurs in the physical space. I think from a business perspective, there's a lot of difficulties in trying to activate around a digital platform, and no one's quite really figured it out yet, be it in the esports space or the traditional sports space. But sooner or later, it'll have to be done. Also, and I'm sure Ryan will touch on this more, the fact that esports is entirely digital means it's subject to intellectual property rights. And that allows the developer to effectively control everything.
Yeah, which is, I mean, we touched on that already, but that's exactly it. We have not seen something like this before where literally the football is owned, for lack of a better analogy, but here it is. So imagine the NFL and the players had to both bargain with the football. And that football has all the power, and that nothing's going to change that unless there's some crazy ruling where playing in esport is a transformational work from an actual digital product, which isn't going to happen. That's it. We're going to see with the next wave of esports again. I think the first steps of doing anything properly now that these companies realize how much money's in here, they're going to take a step back and say, how can we make sure this is going to be long lasting? And hopefully that comes with better regulation and better control.
Sorry, Mike, what was the question? It got kind of lost for me.
It was a two-part, and I want to reiterate the second part, too. First was, what were the biggest hurdles in aligning esports to traditional sports? And the second one, which is, I think, a little bit more of a curious question, is should we be trying to do that, or should we just be trying to be standing on our own legs?
I think there are a lot of advantages to try that. I think it would help a lot if esports organizations would be treated as sports clubs. That brings a lot of advantages. I think it's completely comparable. That would help a lot. So I'm for that. When it comes to regulation, same. I think there are a lot of interests that are overlapping, but of course it still needs to be adjusted to our space, and that it's completely digital. Yeah.
Okay, I got another question here from chat at colleague32. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And we kind of touched this on a little bit, but if you have anything else to add to this, it'd be cool too. It says, do you feel that Valve handles their use of IPs and esports better than Riot does, or are they too different to compare?
In what regard are they even handling it differently?
I think what they're talking about in terms of owning their own league, or essentially the fact that Valve doesn't even touch the league and just kind of lets it run itself.
Well, Valve has the International, which is the biggest part of Dota.
They do, but I mean, they usually, ESL pretty much runs CSGO, right? Like, it's fair to say. So they don't really touch CSGO a lot. I think that's more what he's getting at than anything else.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think Valve only very recently started caring about esports because they realized that, when you have billions of dollars being thrown in your face every day from your marketplace, it's hard to even just be aware of other ventures that are going to be profitable. But now that they've done literally nothing but created or owned two of the most successful esports, yeah, they're probably going to start saying, oh, look what we can do here too, and start having a lot more control and say over what's being done with it. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's still too much of a difference between how League and Valve run the show, though.
I think it's very different. I think Riot has chosen monopoly. They don't give out tournament licenses easily, and Valve treats that completely different. And as I've stated, I think the Valve approach has advantages. I still think, when you look at it, well, there's structural problems. Let me just make a quick example. So, for example, when you have all these tournaments, and of course you can say it's run by ESL, but look at the top teams. They participate in tournaments basically almost every weekend. And what that creates is a space where they don't have any time off. They have never any time off, which is very demanding on the players. Where you have on the other side Riot, and that's an advantage. Where you have, I mean, a long time from we've just had Worlds to the start of the next spring split. So it's better for the players, for sure.
I agree with that also. I do think the ability to have time off can't be understated enough. In working with players and speaking to many of them, especially in titles that don't have time off, it's incredibly draining on them both emotionally and physically. I spoke with one player earlier this year at an event who basically told me that he was planning his wedding in advance, obviously, a year in advance, and had no idea if there was going to be an event that day or that weekend. And he's like, frankly, I need to put my life first. And, that may mean losing out on a substantial portion of my income, especially since that wasn't a salary-driven title like a league or some of these other games. But, that level of uncertainty isn't fair. And frankly, you shouldn't have to gamble, your own personal life around the whims of the companies that, get to decide when this tournament's going to be and so on. So I think it's needed, both from a physical perspective and even just a mental break.
Yeah, and there's a simple solution to that. For example, Valve could decide not to give out licenses for a couple of weeks a year. If they take control of it, and just say, you know what, in December, go back to your families, have fun, relax, regain mental strength. Yeah, sure. I'm all for that.
All right. So one last very quick question that I thought was amusing that we got on Reddit. How do you spell esports in terms of capitalization? Are we doing E capital S sports, esports no capital, E dash sports? What do you guys think? I always go with the capital S because if I do all lowercase, I get like esportes out of it, which I believe is Spanish for sports. I might be making that up. And it just doesn't look right to me.
You're right.
But the dash just looks corny, so I go with the capital S. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm with you 1,000%. And anyone who disagrees is a goddamn fool.
Seriously,
I go capital S.
I won't rant over some questions. To me, it's not important. I think it looks better with capital S, but
it's the most important.
I really wanted to make sure I got this on you too, Roger, because you came out with an ebook a little while ago called The Little Legal Handbook for Esports Teams.
Oh.
And I've always avoided using the word esports in titles and in the first word of a sentence for the specific reason that I don't know if I need to capitalize it. You went with the capital. What was the story behind that? Just went for it?
I did. No, I just went for it. It starts the damn word and it's in the titles, so it's a capital.
Fair enough. And you were comfortable with the capital S too, right?
I've always been a fan of... Yeah, I mean, I've always gone with capital S, but that may be because I'm Puerto Rican, so just seeing it in a lowercase, I read like eSports, which sounds a lot like just bad Spanglish. So, I roll with capital S.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you guys for joining me. I thought it was a blast. I had a lot of fun. We had a lot of very good discussion. I believe the chat enjoyed it as well. Apparently, we have decided exactly how to spell esports. That'll be written in the rulebooks forever. You guys have any last words, any shout-outs, anything like that you guys want to do?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you for hosting this show. I think it's been fun. I think it's been interesting. I hope it's been interesting for the audience. And I'll hope we do this again in the future. Would be great.
Definitely do this again.
I echo those sentiments.
As do I. And realistically, if the people watching haven't noticed yet, we are some of the most non-stereotypical lawyers you'll find. So,
I am Jewish.
I'm German and Catholic. What do you have on me, huh?
I'm governed by the law of the United States. Let's put it that way.
But you know, this is something that we all enjoy, and you know, I think all of us are very open to, and I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes here. You know, are always open to just having these chats about esports and the law and how it intersects, especially because, frankly, there aren't many people that are spreading this knowledge around. So,
yeah, absolutely.
We do like to impart our knowledge where we can.
Yeah, I agree. That's why we're doing this. So I'm glad you guys were here. I'm glad everybody enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We will definitely do this again at some point. I will post it on Reddit when we do. I'll talk to these guys and see if we can come up with another date. But thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a great night.
And thank you for watching, everyone who did.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care.